In Italy, tourists and journalists hoping for a better look at Europe's most active volcano ran for their lives today. An explosion sent ash, rocks, and steam their way at temperatures over 1,800 degrees.
Mount Etna has been putting on an impressive show for days, spewing lava and steam, but no one expected this. The massive explosion was caught on camera by a BBC crew. Piping hot volcanic ash and rock rained down as tourists and the crew fled. One reporter described it as running down a mountain being pelted by rocks, dodging burning boulders and boiling steam. Whoa. A camerawoman shook burning embers off her back.
Get off.
She later tweeted a photo of the hole burned in her jacket. At least 10 people were injured from flying debris, taking shelter in a passing snowcat. The blast is what's known as a frito-magmatic eruption caused by extremely hot lava hitting much colder snow. Police on snowmobiles responded for what was a lucky escape for everyone.
This dramatic video shows an almost unrecognizable Peruvian woman trying to pull herself up from fast-moving driftwood in raging floodwaters. Muddied and battered, she crawls and stumbles in her determination to survive. A fall at the last hurdle, but onlookers pull her to safety. Hospitalized with cuts and bruises, Evangelina Diaz says she survived by grabbing onto pieces of wood and tree branches. Others have not been so lucky, as severe floods and landslides continue to ravage several parts of Peru, killing dozens and leaving thousands homeless.
Everything is unusable. The furniture, there's no bed, nothing inside. Everything is filled with water. There's no place for the water to go.
The floods, which were brought by torrential rains, have eroded sections of coastline and caused rivers to overflow. Police have deployed helicopters to rescue people who have been isolated by the disaster. Schools nationwide are suspending classes. And south of Lima, floodwaters toppled a public transport bus on the banks of the Ica River. The intense rains caused by the warming of the surface waters in the eastern Pacific Ocean are expected to continue for another 2 weeks.
Israel says it's intercepted a missile that was launched from Syria at one of its bases north of Jerusalem. It follows the Israeli army hitting several targets in Syria on Thursday. Can you just tell us how serious an escalation is this?
Well, it's unusual in a few ways. This is not the first time Israel has carried out airstrikes in Syria over the past 6 years. There have been more than a dozen of these sorts of strikes. But it is the first time the Syrian army has fired back with surface-to-air missiles. Now, as you said, these missiles missed. One of them, in fact, was intercepted by an Israeli missile defense system when it crossed the border. But the concern within the Israeli security establishment is that this might be a broader change in policy on the part of Syria. They've allowed 6 years of Israeli airstrikes, Israeli incursions to go unanswered. And the concern here is that if they're going to start firing back now at these sorts of Israeli airstrikes, then there could end up being a major escalation.
OK, we appear to have a lost connection there to our Greg Karlstrom in Tel Aviv.
2 Hamas facilities in the northern Gaza Strip were struck by the Israeli Air Force this morning in response to the latest rocket fire to come out of the territory.
The rocket fell in an empty field near the Sdot Negev Regional Council near Netivot, and there are no reports of damages or casualties in neither the rocket attack nor the IAF response. In the case of a rocket fire, the Iron Dome missile defense system is triggered to analyze the trajectory of the projectile. The system decided to ignore this morning's lobby from Gaza, as it determined it would land in an unpopulated and open field. Though initial investigations reveal Hamas to not be personally responsible for the attack, as the leading organization in the Palestinian Gaza Strip, Israel holds Hamas responsible for any breaches of sovereignty.
Meanwhile, in the United States, it seems like there's no end in sight to the vile hate campaign targeting American Jews. 3 more Jewish communities have just been hit with another wave of bomb threats. St. Louis, Missouri, Atlanta, Georgia, and Boulder, Colorado. These are the locations of the latest Jewish community centers that were targeted, but it wasn't the first time for any of them. Other Jewish day schools and institutions in at least 6 more states and Canada received similar threats by phone calls or email at the start of the week during celebration of the Jewish holiday of Purim. Altogether, there have now been around 150 similar acts against the North American Jewish community since the beginning of this year. Authorities in New York now say they believe a single individual may be responsible, but no one has yet to be apprehended. The hoaxes have been accompanied by a rise in Jewish cemetery desecration and vandalism against North American Jews. Just a few days ago, a Detroit-based website supporting Israel was hacked and filled with anti-Semitic and other expressions of hate.
Pretty scare inside the Port Authority bus terminal after a briefcase containing an explosive device was found.
39-year-old Arsenio Mason sits in court this afternoon, accused of leaving a briefcase with an explosive device police said was similar to a flashbang grenade inside the Deli Plus at the Port Authority building. Mark Colon watched the situation unfold.
There's a lot of cops there, yeah. There's a lot of cops.
What were they doing?
Searching around the deli, and they had bomb dogs, and they blocked certain areas.
Port Authority police got the call around 5 last night and used surveillance video from the deli to identify Mason. When he came back to retrieve his briefcase, officers arrested him.
Yeah, it was frightening, it was scary, a lot of anxiety kicked in, paranoia, and so I just took off running.
Inside Mason's briefcase, police found a fuse from a flashbang grenade screwed into a metal fitting and attached to a cardboard tube. Mason told police he was traveling out west, and officers say he did have a bus ticket to Seattle. Investigators say it's unclear at this point whether he planned to detonate the grenade in New York City or even at all.
And after a string of terror attacks in the country, France is on alert in the wake of a letter bombing at the International Monetary Fund office in Paris, shortly followed by an unrelated shooting at a high school in the south of the country. A female employee at the IMF office suffered minor injuries when a letter bomb mailed from Greece and addressed the world lender's European representative blew up as she opened it. According to local authorities, it was a homemade device. Shortly afterward, a 16-year-old student opened fire at his high school, injuring at least 4 people, including the school's headmaster. While the teenager was armed with a rifle, 2 handguns and 2 grenades. Police insist it wasn't terror-related. The French Interior Ministry says it has opened investigations for both cases.
France has announced that the rapidly growing migrant camp near the port of Dunkirk must be dismantled as soon as possible, just days after clashes between migrants and guards resulted in multiple gunshot and knife victims. Bruno Le Roux, the current Minister of the Interior of France, said, "The question is no longer today about merely restoring public order. It is about the progressive dismantling of the camp, which must begin as soon as possible." Le Roux highlighted rising violence at the site, which has seen regular clashes in recent weeks, most recently on Friday when 2 people were shot and 2 others stabbed. The camp's population has more than doubled since the dismantling of the jungle camp at Calais in October, and is now thought to be holding as many as 1,500 migrants.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, along with first daughter Ivanka Trump as a guest, welcomed a new Broadway musical that celebrates Canadian compassion and openness to international travelers following the September 11th attacks. Trudeau and Trump and some 120 ambassadors from around the world attended the show Come From Away on Wednesday night.
It's a musical with a message about welcoming strangers with open arms.
Where you go through difficult times, that's when you turn and you lean on your friends. And we're there for each other. And that ultimately is what this story is all about.
Justin Trudeau has been critical of President Trump's approach to refugees.
As Donald Trump seeks to crack down on undocumented immigrants in the United States, about half of whom are Mexican, there are some early signs that more Mexican migrants seek a future in Canada. Canadian government data shows a tripling of Mexicans seeking to travel to Canada in the 3 months since the visa requirement was shelved. It is not a firm indicator, as many people could be genuine tourists. But tie it to a surge in calls and emails to immigration lawyers from recently arrived Mexicans looking for work permits, it suggests a new migration pattern may be emerging. 7 immigration lawyers, consultants, and activists said that the requests for legal advice from Mexicans who had entered Canada since December 1st had roughly tripled compared to the same period in 2015 to 2016.
U.S. State Department is advising against traveling to Mexico this spring break. According to Breitbart, the feds have cautioned travel to many popular vacation spots in Mexico because of violence attributed to the, quote, activities of criminal organizations. This alert stems from the State Department's December 2016 Mexico travel warning. It classified Mexico as a country with a high potential for kidnapping and violent crime because of a lack of security measures in place for travelers. The State Department says there is no evidence that Americans are being targeted, but underscores the fact that violence has occurred in areas that Americans visit.
Relief across many European capital cities on Thursday morning. Dutch centre-right Prime Minister Mark Rutte fighting off the challenge of anti-Islam, anti-EU rival Geert Wilders, scoring an election victory celebrated across the EU. German Chancellor Angela Merkel quick to send her congratulations.
Netherlands are our partners, friends, neighbours. Therefore, I was very happy that a high turnout led to a very pro-European result, a clear signal.
Ein klares Signal, und das nach Tagen, in denen die Niederlande.
And that after days in which the Netherlands had to tolerate accusations and reproaches from Turkey which are totally unacceptable, and after days where we showed our solidarity.
On Thursday, Britain's Queen Elizabeth formally granted Prime Minister Theresa May the power to launch exit talks with the European Union, approving legislation which passed through Parliament on Monday. In the announcement made in Parliament by Speaker John Bercow, he confirms that May will now be able to begin divorce talks at any time. Her spokesman hinted negotiations could start as early as on Monday, and any such decision was likely to come toward the end of the month rather than in the upcoming days.
The first impeachment complaint has been filed against President Rodrigo Duterte in the House of Representatives. Magdalo Representative Gary Alejano filed the complaint March 16th. The complaint accuses Duterte of violating the Constitution, committing bribery, betraying public trust, graft and corruption, and other crimes. It also cites Duterte's alleged involvement in the Davao Death Squad, his so-called war on drugs, and his alleged failure to declare hidden wealth. Duterte's allies rejected the accusations in the complaint and called the move an attempt to destabilize the country. Solicitor General Jose Calida said the complaint will not fly and called Alejano a toady of Senator Antonio Trillanes IV, a critic of Duterte. Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre II, meanwhile, said the complaint has no solid evidence to support it. The House is now in recess. The complaint will have to wait until May 2nd when the House resumes session.
Australia may ban unvaccinated children from attending preschools and childcare centres. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has written to leaders in all states and territories, urging them to adopt so-called no jab, no play laws. As the term implies, children who don't get the shot wouldn't get to participate in these programs. Turnbull says parents who don't vaccinate are putting everyone's children at risk. He says, quote, "This is not a theoretical exercise. This is life and death." Sky News reports the Prime Minister's message follows a meeting with a mother whose baby died from whooping cough that may have been contracted at a childcare centre. 3 Australian states already have no jab, no play laws in place. The Australian Child Health Poll finds that 95% of parents keep their kids' vaccinations up to date. However, the poll also finds 10% of Australian parents believe vaccines can cause autism.
In the United States, the Trump administration has unveiled a budget plan that calls for a massive increase in military spending. To pay for it, drastic cuts have been proposed at the State Department, the Environmental Protection Agency, and other areas of government.
The budget outline, worth $1.15 trillion is seen as an overhaul of federal government spending. It slashes many domestic programs like medical research, environment protection, and even foreign aid by up to 30%. On the other hand, it seeks a 10% hike in spending for the military and homeland security, including President Trump's planned U.S.-Mexico border wall.
He wants more money for defense, more money for border enforcement, more money for law enforcement generally, more money for the vets, more money for school choice.
Mulvaney added that the idea is to offset that money with savings elsewhere so that it won't broaden the deficit. The budget for the military is a $54 billion boost, the largest since President Ronald Reagan's Pentagon buildup in the 1980s. A day after unveiling the budget plan, President Trump tweeted, "Without safety, there can be no prosperity." The general blueprint of the budget is said to be made public around May. But as the budget plan has to pass Congress, it's not legally binding. Experts say the plan is not likely to pass as is due to the fierce opposition from the Democrats.
Climate science would see major funding cuts under President Donald Trump's 2018 federal budget. The proposal reduces the Environmental Protection Agency's budget by 31% and ends funding for international climate change programs and research. It also seeks to eliminate more than 50 EPA programs. NASA's Earth science efforts will lose $102 million in funding. The budget also cancels climate research missions like PACE and Discover. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration will lose more than $250 million in grants and programs that support coastal and marine management and research. The budget would also eliminate payments to the United Nations Green Climate Fund, a key part of the Paris Climate Agreement.
More questions into the possible link between a popular weed killer and cancer. Court documents made public on Tuesday, March 14th, now fueling concerns over the safety of Monsanto's Roundup and other similar items. That's because the records show that an EPA official who was supposed to be evaluating the company was actually working on its behalf. Other documents suggest Monsanto ghost-wrote cancer studies of its own weed killer and also revealed some disagreement within the EPA over its own safety assessment. It's all part of a mass litigation in San Francisco claiming Monsanto failed to warn that exposure to Roundup could cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
According to a report from the Wall Street Journal, Memphis Meats has claimed to have produced the first chicken grown entirely from self-replicating cells in a lab. Earlier this week, the company invited a few taste testers to officially taste their lab-grown chicken and duck. Most claimed the clean meat was nearly identical to real poultry and said they would eat it again. However, animal advocates and scientists say this could have huge ethical and environmental implications. Leading experts suggest that growing food for the world's exponentially increasing population is likely to send greenhouse gas emissions over the safety threshold in the next 3 decades unless there is a worldwide push to eat less meat. Experts also fear that widespread use of antibiotics in the meat industry is contributing to the global rise of antibiotic-resistant superbugs.
A group of doctors in Newcastle has been granted the first UK license to perform IVF procedures that involve 3 donors. The technique is intended for the use in cases where the mother's mitochondrial DNA will likely pose threats to the health and possibly life of the baby. Female parents can pass along a number of mitochondrial diseases that cause babies to experience a bevy of adverse health conditions. Those include seizures, muscle weakness, diabetes, learning disabilities, blindness, and failure of the liver and heart. The corrective method, which was approved in December, replaces the unhealthy mitochondria in an embryo with healthy material from a female donor. As that's the only genetic material altered, the children born retain the physical and behavioral traits of the parents.
Before quickly deleting the tweet and claiming their account had been compromised, fast food chain McDonald's Twitter account sent a message to their 3 million Twitter followers which took aim at Trump through the president's favorite Twitter medium. The original tweet was posted at 9:16 a.m. It read, "At real Donald Trump, you are actually a disgusting excuse of a president, and we would love to have you at Barack Obama back. Also, you have tiny hands." An hour later, the company unpinned and deleted the tweet. It had amassed more than 1,000 retweets in that time. McDonald's published a new message saying their account had been compromised and an investigation had been launched.
The next time a spider crawls across your living room floor, you may want to think twice about crushing it with whatever's handy. According to a recent study by scientists from Switzerland, Sweden, and Germany, the eight-legged creatures provide a tremendous service to humans and especially those with bug phobias. The team estimates that spiders eat between 400 million and 800 million tons of insects and other tiny pests every year, keeping such population in check. A release about the research effort puts that figure in context, noting all humans together consume an estimated 400 million tons of meat and fish annually. Whales feed on 280 to 500 million tons of seafood, while the world's total seabird population eats an estimated 70 million tons of fish and other seafood. The study's lead author commented, "We hope that these estimates and their significant magnitude raise public awareness and increase the level of appreciation for the important global role of spiders in terrestrial food webs." The team arrived at their estimates by examining 65 existing studies and using that information to calculate the total spider population. They then calculated likely food intake based on known feeding requirements and observed patterns.
Patty cake, bakers.
This is the precious moment a little baby sees his dad for the very first time.
Roll it and pat it and mark it with a B.
Reagan was unable to see after developing health complications shortly after birth. But the now 9-month-old got glasses, while his dad Brandon was deployed to Antarctica with the Air Force. Now that he's back home, after singing Patty Cake, Reagan can't help but snuggle into his father's arms, and Brandon can't help but break down, realizing that his son can now see him. The sweetest sight for the sorest of eyes.